It's no secret that Bethesda's latest release, Starfield, is less than stellar. More than that, Bethesda has been on a pretty significant downward spiral for a long time, seemingly only able to re-release Skyrim with any level of success, and even then you could claim that those releases are still fraught with technical issues over a decade later. It has been a long time since Bethesda has been a developer equated with quality content. I want to go back to the very start of the Elder Scrolls Saga, and see how it compares stacked up against what exists today. I think the first thing we need to address about Arena is something that is present throughout: ambition and scope. This game boasts a massive map. According to the game manual, it is 4,000 kilometers east to west and 3,000 kilometers north to south. That is 12 million square kilometers. In addition, the manual boasts 400 unique locations to explore, including cities, dungeons, inns, and the like. This was achieved through procedural generation. However, it has also been challenged by fans. Apparently, if you try to actually walk to other villages and towns, you can never actually make it there, eventually causing the game to break from loading so many resources. Seems overhyping is not new to Bethesda. Either way, the game world on offer is massive. Unfortunately, this is actually one of the game's biggest weaknesses. Let's start with the cities. Sure, there are a lot of them, and they are huge, but they are about 95% useless buildings that all look the same. The only buildings you're going to care about are either going to be the shops, guilds, inns, or possibly quest related. Unfortunately, due to procedural generation, these useful buildings are interspersed in a city of empty, useless buildings. You can ask the townspeople for directions, but you'll find yourself turned around so often, getting anything done in town just becomes a chore. This is made further frustrating as you can't just memorize a single city's layout. You will need to visit a minimum of 9 unique cities in the completion of the main quest alone. While we're mentioning useless filler, you won't visit even a fraction of the cities on offer. Through the main quest, you touch on such a small percentage of what actually exists, and there's no real incentive to visit any of these other locations. For the purposes of gameplay, they really are just names on a map. You can visit, but why would you? On to the dungeons. There are a few interesting entries in the main quest, but by large they are an absolutely confusing mess. They have limited verticality, with trenches and rivers you can navigate. The rivers can be of the water or lava variety. There are multiple dungeons that require the use of secret walls to progress, and due to poor implementation, traversal by water can literally be game-stopping. I will expand on that particular point when we get there in the game. Nothing in these dungeons is laid out logically. It's just a mess of tunnels and geometry that you'll get lost in over and over. Use of the map is a must, but pulling it up is slow and cumbersome. Since we're on the topic of monster-infested dungeons, let's talk about the combat. It's a bit of a mixed bag. The game works on a dice roll system similar to the way Morrowind does, wherein when you swing your weapon at an enemy, an invisible dice rolls, and based on your stats and the stats of your enemy, the game determines if you hit and for how much. I don't hate this system, but it does feel bad when you face enemies with high armor who just keep parrying your hits. Even with nearly maxed out plus hit towards the end of the game, I just found I was constantly missing hits. The way the combat actually worked was kind of interesting. You use your mouse to swing your weapon and are able to decide the angle of your attacks. You can do horizontal and vertical slashes, angled slashes, and even thrusts and overhead chops. While not perfect, it was a lot more engaging than other dungeon crawlers of the time that simply had you press an attack button. Unfortunately, due to the aforementioned roll system, things did get spammy quickly, as you'd be trying to swing as fast as possible to counter those bad dice rolls. Let's get into the character creation on offer here. Now, as is going to be a theme in this game, you're going to want to have the manual beside you when you create your character. Nothing is explained as you go through this, and bad decisions here will stick with you throughout the game. I had initially wanted to play as a Khajiit, but interestingly enough, they aren't cat people in this initial entry. They're just dudes with masks on. They sort of look like wrestlers. I decide instead to make myself a Nord barbarian. They give good benefits like resistances to poison and disease. We give him some stats, and drop on into the world of Tamriel. The preamble backstory to get us going is that the Emperor, Uriel Septim, was betrayed by his battle mage Jaeger Tharn, and imprisoned in an alternate dimension. The Emperor's sorceress, Rhea Silmain, was killed, but somehow managed to use magic to make herself incorporeal and acts as our guide throughout this adventure. She lets us know the only way to save the Emperor is to reconstruct the Staff of Chaos. Quest in the back of our mind, we have but one goal currently: escape the prison. This area serves as a tutorial, but a pretty awful one. There are goblins here attacking pretty well as soon as we leave our cell. The game does nothing to explain how to actually equip weapons and attack, or what any of the various buttons surrounding your HUD do. It's pretty easy to die right away here and lose your entire character before you've so much as had a chance to save. It sort of feels like it's punishing you for not reading the 88-page manual prior to starting. Very weak start aside, we make it out of the dungeon and are transported to a random city in your character's home province to start your quest in full. I wandered around the city a bit, and even explored the wilderness outside, but was sort of overwhelmed by the scale of everything surrounding me. I had the name of where to find the first staff piece, a place called Fang Lair, but literally zero direction on where this was or how to get there. I cannot overstate how massive the game map is here. Opening it and looking for a place to start had me reconsidering my life choices. I can imagine this is where a lot of new players get filtered out of the game, especially if you're accustomed to the modern gaming world. Eventually I decide to start asking around town, and one of the townsfolk points me towards Hammerfell. We go there and ask around again. We are pointed to the palace to talk to the queen. She will let us know where Fang Lair is, but we must first recover a parchment she had stolen. Conveniently, the parchment is needed for her to decipher the location of Fang Lair. The parchment is located at Stone Keep. She puts it on our map, and we're off to our first dungeon crawl. Here is a good time to interject. This is literally how the entire game from here on out plays. You get to a new city, ask around for a while, find someone who knows the location you're looking for, do an errand for them, and get the location that you really want to visit. It is an extremely formulaic game, which I guess goes hand in hand with procedural generation. Anyhow, we journey to Stonekeep. This is one of the more forgiving dungeons of the game, being only a single level. We explore its depths, mostly encountering giant rats and skeletons as our primary adversaries. I explore the entire map for a good while, only to discover the parchment we are seeking was actually in a room just off the main corridor. Surrounded by an indoor lake, we find an island guarded by ghouls. We make short work of them, grab the parchment, and bring it back to the queen. We are now headed to Fang Lair proper for the first staff piece. This dungeon isn't too bad either. It's an abandoned dwarven mine. I wander around for a while, avoiding what I assume to be death pits around the map. I explore everything I can see on my map, then am stumped. There doesn't seem to be anywhere else to go, and I haven't found the staff piece. In frustration, I jump into one of the death pits, and I don't die. Apparently, the pitch black holes all over the floor don't hurt you. In fact, jumping in them is necessary to progress the dungeon. I feel like some sort of signposting for this wouldn't have hurt. Years of gaming have trained me not to jump into cavernous pits. With that sorted, and a new dimension of travel discovered, we make our way through to the second level. This level is shorter, and we find a sealed room locked by a riddle. What is neither fish nor flesh, feathers nor bone, but still has fingers and thumbs of its own? This is a great time to mention, I am not a riddle guy, and there are a lot of these riddles in the game. I won't lie, I did solve a few of them on my own, but for the most part looked them up. Some are so obtuse, I can't fathom how someone without Google was able to solve them at all. These require text-based answers as well. There's no multiple choice here. I guess gamers were just smarter in the 90s. Or I might just be stupid. Be sure to let me know in the comments. Riddle solved, the door opens, and we are instantly killed by a bunch of hellhounds. Fun. This is another great time to segue into a super obnoxious part of the gameplay in Arena. Damage feedback. That is, the complete absence of any damage feedback in the game. There's nothing to indicate that you're losing health outside of looking at your health bar. There aren't flashes or anything else that you might see, like in an FPS. The screen does rumble a little bit, but not much more than it would from just normal movement, so it's hard to discern when you're actually being attacked. The sound design is pretty awful as well. I will touch on that more later. This is further compounded by the absolutely unfair damage magic attacks do in this game. Even towards the end of the game, when I had leveled up significantly, it would only take a couple fireballs or lightning bolts to bring me down from full to dead instantly. Stupidly enough, you can pretty well negate magic damage completely with a potion of resistance. But generally, by the time you realize you're being hit by magic, most of your health is already gone. You die a lot in this game due to this, and the fact that you just lose health so quickly, there's often no time to react. It is probably one of the save scummier games I've played in recent years, but I can't imagine doing it without. Back to it, we reload and open the door again, this time ready to duck to the side and lure the hounds out, but they don't follow. I go back over and cautiously look into the room to find that they have imploded on themselves. This is another weird thing that happens in this game, and I can't discern if it's a bug or a feature. Any enemies that use fire magic seem to randomly just die on their own given enough time. This does not apply to lightning or cold magic. Is there something inherent to fire magic that's killing its wielders? I guess I won't question it, as it helps me through the room to claim my first staff piece. Heading on out of the mines, we discover the next design decision that I absolutely hate. Firstly, there are a minimum of 16 dungeons in this game. None of these dungeons have quick escapes at the end. You have to backtrack through the same massive maze that you took down. Second, monsters on previous floors respawn when you leave, meaning not only are you backtracking through dungeons that you've previously cleared, but you also must kill all of the monsters again. Absolutely infuriating game design that feels like it just pads out the game length. Getting some rest, we are visited by Rhea, who gives us the next location on our quest, Labyrinthian in Skyrim. So, this next portion of the quest mirrors what we've already done. Once again, we need to visit a new city, do a side dungeon, then finally visit the dungeon proper for the staff piece. For the sake of time and my own sanity, I'll only really talk about the side dungeons if there's something interesting or unique there, and instead focus on the main dungeons of the story. For this part of the quest, the side dungeon is the Ice Keep. This one is worth mentioning, as it almost made me give up on completing this game. There is something inherently wrong with the first floor of the Ice Keep. It is just a normal dungeon, but it crashed just continuously, about once every couple of minutes. The only way I could complete it was to dash through, saving every 30 seconds or so, then reloading to make progress each time I crashed. I would guess my game crashed probably 20 to 30 times before I could find the exit. Just brutal. Once you reach the second floor, the game restabilized to its normal, infrequent crash rate. This is as good a time as any to mention how unstable this game is. Ice Keep was by far the worst, but the entire game was wrought with crashes throughout. If you are interested in playing this early entry from Bethesda, know that them having buggy products is not a new thing. It seems to be ingrained in the company from its earliest days. You will have technical issues throughout. Aside from the crashing, the game ran weirdly bad for something so old, oftentimes slowing down to a crawl, or speeding up randomly. Any room with more than 2 to 3 enemies would be a struggle for the game to handle, and often crash to desktop when loading new areas or cinematics. This could be a DOSBox issue. However, looking online at older walkthroughs and reviews, you do see a pattern of people having similar experiences. I mean, the game is free, but still, buyer beware, I suppose. Moving on, the main dungeon here is Labyrinthian. This one is sort of an interesting dungeon. There's a main corridor locked by 2 doors. The doors cannot be picked. You need to find 2 separate keys held by 2 wraiths on either side of the dungeon. One is Morgus the Dim, the other is Canon the Elder. Each has their own side of the dungeon, and their own riddle to complete. Successfully answering each of their riddles sets them free, and they reward you with their keys. With both keys in hand, we can move on to the next level of the dungeon and find the second piece of the staff. From here on out, each time we receive a staff piece, Jaeger Tharn sends out his hit squad to try and kill us. These are always a bit of a laugh, because he has a tendency to send super weak enemies. I think once he sent a stone golem that was a bit of a threat, but otherwise he would send like a single orc or a human thief to attack me. What a dumbass. I hope someone melts him into lava at some point. Next we're off to explore the Elden Grove in Valenwood, home of the Wood Elves. Elden Grove is one of the more unique dungeons, being above ground to start. You navigate a foggy garden maze, and I actually found this part of the dungeon pretty enjoyable. You got some good ambience with the sound of the wolves stalking you through the mists and the occasional wraith getting the jump on you. Unlike some of the later dungeons, this one felt fairly difficult, but not unfairly so. The second level of the dungeon is an ancient abandoned city. It's not super notable, but it does have one standout thing, being the boats you can find to traverse the waterways. These are super fun to drive around, zippy and smooth. They make the usually tedious water sections enjoyable experiences. You literally never see the boats again outside this dungeon. Major bummer. Anyhow, we grab the staff piece and get closer to our goal. Next up, we're headed to the Hall of the Colossus in Khajiit Land. You remember the Khajiit? The humans with wrestler masks on? That's what they've always been. Before reaching the halls, I want to mention the side dungeon here, as it has a massive design failure and I love any opportunity to complain. The side dungeon here is the Temple of Agamemnus. It is mandatory to complete to progress the main quest. Several levels deep in the temple, we come across a floor that is primarily flooded walkways you must traverse. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that while you're in water, you cannot attack in any way. And oftentimes, these waterways run parallel to walkable areas where monsters can be present. In Arena, the player character cannot share space with a monster, and cannot pass by a monster without killing it if it is blocking his path. Well, here in the temple, there are waterways you must traverse, but the monsters are positioned on raised walkways above them, blocking you from progressing forward until the monsters are killed. Not a big deal, right? Just kill the monsters so you can pass. Well, you can't. There is no way to attack from the water, and the layout of the level makes accessing the monsters impossible. The only solution to this problem is through the use of the Pass Wall spell. This is a spell that allows you to remove blocks from the environment, allowing you to create your own temporary tunnels in that environment. Unfortunately, as I'm a barbarian with no magical prowess, my only solution is to buy an enchanted item to give me access to the spell. This means I have to re-clear my way out of the temple, search multiple Mage Guild shops to find an item enchanted with the Pass Wall spell, sell half of my equipment to afford the staggering 15,000 gold price tag, and finally, clear my way back into the temple, use the Pass Wall, and kill the wraith that was blocking my way. What an absolute pain in the ass. The actual Hall of the Colossus dungeon is set up so that you must retrieve a large number of keys to unlock all the doors in the central chamber. Being horribly burnt out from the last slog of a dungeon, I make use of my newly found Pass Wall ability to pretty much skip this dungeon. But I remain justified in doing this, as the game has included a way to get back out of the halls after using Pass Wall, so they must have expected people to do this. Even the developers knew people would be tired of this dungeon. The staff fragment is found in a large room with floating obelisks and lightning homunculus. We grab it and get the hell out. We now have 4 of the 8 staff fragments. Next up on our quest is the Crystal Tower in Somerset Isle. This dungeon is notable for being fairly large, with 4 distinct levels, and is one of the last dungeons in the game with sizable amounts of loot. You're going to want to get as much as you can, as the last half of this adventure is rough, and you're going to need money for healing potions. Making our way through the tower, the 3rd level deserves a shout-out. It is a literal zoo, seemingly being run by trolls. There are cages with all manner of beasts in them. You can kill the troll jailers to get keys to access these cells. There is even flavor text on all the monster types here, and pretty much every monster in the game is present, with the exception of some of the super powerful endgame monsters like the Lich. In an oddly terrifying twist, there is a cell labeled for us. I feel like the trolls are not intelligent enough to have created this jail. There must be a mastermind behind it, and they supposedly have an interest in us. Might want to hire a bodyguard for the nightly campsite. Toward the end of the floor, we encounter our first fire daemon, a hulking fire lizard. He doesn't prove too tough, and we make our way up to the 4th floor and claim the 5th staff piece guarded by a pair of wraiths. Rhea appears again to give us the next location, the Crypt of Hearts. She annoyingly doesn't tell us which province to visit this time, but some pestering of the local populace leads us to High Rock. The crypt itself is a multi-level dungeon featuring an undead theme. There really isn't a lot to say about this dungeon, besides that it is long and torturous. The game feels like it should have ended 2 dungeons ago. Additionally, the place is fraught with so many more enemies than previous dungeons. Combat at this point is just spamming attack and healing potions trying to survive. I don't think I'm under-leveled. I mean, I've cleared each dungeon twice, going down and then back up again each time. I've even done a bit of grinding for extra levels. I think the game is just really poorly balanced in the endgame. The staff piece is guarded by a couple of fire daemons. We make short work of them utilizing a potion of resist fire, and we get out. Next up, we make our way to the Black Marsh. I love that the Argonians here are just reskinned humans. I get that the resources are limited on a DOS game, but who do they think they're fooling? Anyhow, our destination here is Merkwood. This dungeon is actually a nice relief from the last few Gauntlet mazes. It's a big outdoor forest that is mostly open spaces. We can explore a bit. I even grind out a bit of experience here before making my way to the center of the map. In the center, we find a large stone maze. Within, we are assailed by 2 Medusa enemies, challenging snake women with the ability to paralyze the player. Very dangerous, but if you can get in close, they seem to stop casting their paralyze spell. Still tough enemies, but not unbeatable. Once we reach the end of the maze, we find entry to a small underground vault. Within is a central chamber flanked by several prisons containing iron golems. A riddle will unlock the staff piece, but I decide I want some experience, so I answer wrong on purpose to release the golems from their cages. We handily dispatch the behemoths, then answer correctly and retrieve the 7th staff fragment. Only one more to go. We are so close. Upon leaving the Merkwood, we encounter yet another potentially game-breaking bug. Traveling anywhere from here on the world map seems to cause an instant crash. Resting and re-entering the underground area seems to fix this, but I definitely had some rage here. Thinking I wouldn't be able to finish the game I've now invested a solid 15 hours into. Deep breaths. The final staff piece is located in the one province we have yet to visit, Morrowind. Specifically, we will be visiting Dagoth Ur. The volcano Dagoth Ur, not the boss NPC attempting to ascend to godhood. I have to admit, I got a bit of a second win for this last dungeon. I'm a pretty big Morrowind fanboy, and arriving in the city, you can actually see the erupting volcano in the distance. It's a little touch, but that's what makes a game memorable. We have one more side dungeon to do before being given the location of the main dungeon, Black Gate. There's nothing to say about Black Gate besides that it is an awful mess of mazy corridors, rivers, and tedious key hunts. On to Dagoth Ur. This dungeon actually has some pretty good variety. The first floor ends with a large locked crypt. Bursting in, we encounter our first vampire, a powerful casting enemy. We slay him with the assistance of our trusty healing potions and move on to floor 2. This floor is another key hunt similar to the Hall of the Colossus. We can skip all but one lock with our pass wall spell. The final lock requires a key that we have to retrieve. Getting to the key is a large circuitous path that eventually leads to a trench-covered arena. In the middle of the arena is our first Lich. It is a tough fight, but our lightning resist potion carries us through, we recover the key, and move into the bowels of the volcano. This last level is mercifully short. We follow a long corridor to a lake of lava. Using our Mark of Levitation to get past, we kill the homunculus guarding the center aisle and claim our final staff piece. Now, I had expected some fanfare here for assembling the staff, but there is surprisingly nothing. We make our way out of the mines and set up camp. Jaeger Tharn appears again to let us know the staff we have spent the last hours reassembling is useless, and challenges us to come find him if we dare. Son of a bitch. Of course there's a final dungeon. We make our way to the Imperial Palace to kill this wannabe Voldemort once and for all. Well, I guess that joke doesn't make any sense, since this game predates Harry Potter by a good margin. Maybe Voldemort is a wannabe Jaeger Tharn? Focus. We're almost done. We assault the Imperial Palace and find it rife with the strongest monsters we have encountered yet. I spent every cent I had on healing potions and just bum rush my way through. Arriving on the final level, we're stuck in a corridor with no exit, so I make use of my pass wall spell to break through. We have to fight through a gauntlet of 4 liches before entering the final arena. This is a slog, and probably costs me 80 healing potions, but we win. The final boss chamber is a bit of a head-scratcher. It's an island in the middle of a lake of lava. Surrounding the lake are several small platforms, each with a lich on it. Jaeger Tharn is on the middle platform. Now, this would be a devastatingly difficult challenge to deal with, but the central island has big walls surrounding it, and the liches can't get off their islands. So by using a shock resist potion and levitation spell, we can quickly zoom into Tharn's cubby and render the liches useless. For someone who conquered the known world, Tharn isn't much of a strategist. Tharn himself isn't a huge threat, he just tries to whack us with his staff, rather ineffectually. However, he is invulnerable to damage. Scouring his little chamber, we find a key. With it, we open another door containing the Ruby of Fire. We click on it, and the final cutscene begins to play. Nope, never mind. The cutscene crashed the game. We do everything again, and this time the cutscene actually plays. Tharn dies a super painful looking death, melting into a pile of lava. The Emperor is returned to our dimension, and to thank us for saving him, he immediately gives us a super stressful sounding job, entitling us the Eternal Champion and putting us in charge of difficult tasks. Like, I'm pretty sure the in-game time to complete this quest was about 10 years. I think giving us a bunch of gold and a comfortable retirement in the countryside would have been a better reward. Maybe it's just me. With that, the game is done. You're kicked back to the game world to continue your quest, should you so choose, but as I value my mental health, I decide to call it quits there. The Elder Scrolls Arena will be 30 years old this coming March, and oh boy does it ever show its age. Gameplay-wise, the game is unintuitive and clunky. Even for its age, it plays like a flight simulator. Other games in this genre are far more intuitive to control and to play. A perfect example would be Menzoberranzan, that I played a few videos ago. It is of similar age, but I felt I could pick that game up and play without too much preamble. Arena practically requires you to read an 80-page instruction manual before you've even created your character. If you don't, you are likely to find yourself dead before you've slain your first goblin. The game had scope. That can't be denied. But so much of this is half-baked and not really thought out. A perfect example is the resting mechanic. You can rest mid-dungeon to regain your health in Arena. However, if you aren't on a raised platform, you are nearly guaranteed to get interrupted by an enemy ambush mid-rest, oftentimes ending up weaker than you were before you rested. Okay, so use raised platforms to rest then, right? Well, they pretty much cease to exist in later dungeons, forcing you instead to rely on spamming potions to stay alive. There is nothing satisfying about pausing the game every 3 seconds to chug potions. Another one is repairing. Your equipment can break and needs periodic repairs. Cool, that's fine. Lots of games have that mechanic. Arena, for some godforsaken reason, made repairing your equipment take 10 in-game days. So in order to repair your gear, you need to drop it off, find an inn, and sleep for nearly 2 weeks. Then you can go back and pick it up. Even at a glance, what is the point of this other than to waste the player's time? It is not immersive, it's just annoying. The controls for the game were mostly fine. However, they tried to include both mouse and keyboard movement, which would be fine, except you attack by swinging your cursor around the screen. Since there is mouse movement that you can't disable, this led to accidental movement constantly while attacking. Gameplay-wise, it's acceptable for what it is, and I'll even go so far as to say I mostly enjoyed the combat early game. But the late game, they just overwhelm you with so many overtuned enemies. It's one of the only RPGs I've ever played where I felt weaker at the end of the game rather than stronger. I can't imagine anyone spending hours grinding to be able to do the main quest. The 18 mandatory dungeons are more than enough. All in all, I probably spent about 20 hours to clear the main quest. And on that note, I have to mention again the size of this game is mind-boggling. Like, it feels like a case of them doing something just because they could, not because it made sense or would be fun to do. There is nothing redeeming about exploring the jumbled mess this game calls cities, and I can't imagine wanting to spend my time exploring the wilderness in this game outside of a passing curiosity. There was no need for this game to be this massive. The dungeons, while there are a few standout moments, mostly jumble together as a mess of similar-looking dingy corridors. The game's best dungeon is probably the Merkwood, as it's really the only dungeon that didn't require me to check my map every 10 seconds to get my bearings. I could just play and enjoy the game. So would I recommend this game in the year 2024? Absolutely not. Unless you are curious to experience a piece of gaming history, I would steer clear of this title at all costs. I have yet to play it, but from my understanding, Daggerfall addresses most of the issues I had with Arena, so that one might be a better place to start. Shockingly, there are issues in this game that are still present in the current generation of Bethesda games. creating spongy enemies rather than real difficulty, having mass amounts of copy-paste bland content, and having ambition that far exceeds its reach are all hallmarks of current-day Bethesda. It is wild that a company with this sort of pedigree can think that it can keep spitting out soulless content with no need to innovate. As much as I have disparaged this title, I can at least say they were trying to do something big here. I think they missed the mark, but at least you can see the attempt was there. Current market Bethesda is best on display with their constant re-releases of Skyrim, and recently, their complete flop with Starfield. They refuse to take risks and do anything different, just pushing out the same slop content year after year, riding on past glories. If nothing else, I won't soon forget my experiences in Arena. If you made it here, thanks for watching. I would love to hear your opinions on the game. If you have a different perspective, I love some good discourse on ancient CRPG titles. See you next time.